Are you tired of that rocky hormonal relationship with cortisol? Ready to dump those toxic friends called stress and anxiety? Down to earn your black belt so you could whip free radicals in the butt? Hell, we all know I am. If you've answered yes to any of those questions, well then, my friend, you've come to the right video. What's up, you guys? Welcome to this episode of Holistically, where we discuss all things health and wellness. I'm Dr. Maximus, an ECFMG certified doctor of medicine, here to help you supplement your health needs. But you could just call me Max. Ladies and gents, give it up for the herbal guest of the day. We're going to be talking about ashwagandha. Now, I know this is going to be a long one, so go ahead and grab that notebook, grab that pillow, grab your best friend, whatever it is you need to sit down and listen to me ramble on for the next 10 or 15 minutes, but I promise to make it worth your while. Today we're going to be looking at 4 benefits that ashwagandha could have on your health and wellness. But don't worry, you guys, that's not all we're going to talk about when it comes to ashwagandha. In future videos, I got more benefits coming up. We're also going to look at usages, dosages, side effects, you name it. So if any of that sounds awesome, guys, go ahead and hit that like button, ring that notification bell so you get notified when I release my next videos, and throw me some comments down below. Let me know what it is that you guys thought of this video, if you liked my style, my approach, my way of teaching, and let me know, give me some video suggestions on what it is that you guys want to hear about in future videos. All right, let's get started. So you guys, we're gonna start off by talking a little bit about the background of ashwagandha. Now, ashwagandha has a scientific name which sounds like Harry Potter spell, and that is Withania somnifera. It's also known by some other common names such as winter cherry and Indian ginseng. Couldn't tell you why, but ashwagandha, this is actually pretty funny. Ashwagandha literally translates to the smell of horse. And I mean, apparently that's because it literally smells like a horse when you cut the roots. I mean, get some deodorant or something. And it's also believed to give you the strength and vitality of a horse when you consume it. I mean, just check me out. So ashwagandha, guys, it is a small woody shrub that grows about 2 feet high. It's found growing in Africa, India, and around the Mediterranean. Now, ashwagandha has some important medicinal bioactive compounds, and I know these might sound confusing, but later on in other videos, I'm going to talk about why this is important. The first is withanolides. Now, this is the most important of the medicinal compounds, and that's because when you go to buy ashwagandha, you're going to be looking for the withanolide content, and I'll explain that in the video where we talk about the dosages and where to get ashwagandha. The other important compound is called cetoindocides, and there are other important alkaloids as well, which we may or may not discuss. Now, y'all, let's get into the benefits. So the first benefit we're going to look at is about chronic stress, and ashwagandha has been used for over 3,000 years in the Ayurvedic medical system, which is a type of medical system which originated in India, and it was also found to be used in other medicinal systems such as African and Mediterranean indigenous systems as well. Traditionally, ashwagandha has been used as an adaptogen. Now, an adaptogen is a herbal substance which pretty much, like the name implies, has the word adapt in it. It allows our bodies to adapt to stress. Now, the term adaptogen was coined in the 1940s by a Dr. Nikolai Lazarev, who was a Soviet scientist, medical doctor, pharmacologist, and he was practically studying the body's resistance to stress. So he defined a adaptogen as a non-toxic substance that produces a non-specific effect on the body by normalizing our body's physiological function. And essentially what that means is, like I said before, it helps our bodies adapt to stress, to become stronger to deal with environmental stressors, mental stressors. This could be any kind of stress that the body is experiencing. So adaptogens are meant to prepare us to deal with stress and to help us recover from stress. Now let's take a look at what stress actually is. So stress is pretty much a condition when someone is either physically or mentally overloaded. I mean, that kind of happens to everyone these days. I know, working in the medical field, I tend to get really stressed out, and sometimes, that leads me to feel overwhelmed, it leads me to feel nervous, it leads me to feel anxious and less capable of doing what it is that I need to do. So let's take a look at how stress affects our bodies. So there's a system in the body which is called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis, or the HPA axis for short. And this is pretty much the hormonal system in our bodies. So what this does is that it produces, secretes, and regulates hormone function, and during periods of stress, the system kind of goes out of whack. So essentially, when you're under stress, the HPA axis ends up producing a lot of cortisol. Now, cortisol is the primary stress hormone, and when cortisol is out of whack, everything else goes out of whack. All the rest of your hormones got out of whack. It's also released at different times of the day when it's not supposed to be. So to kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about here, we all know that melatonin is the sleep hormone, and your body releases that at night. It's called the circadian rhythm, or, to make it easier, it's the inner biological clock. So when it's time for you to go to bed, your body ends up secreting melatonin, so you end up falling and staying asleep. Well, the body kind of does the same thing with cortisol. Cortisol is released primarily in the morning, so you get out of bed and you start seizing the day. So cortisol is not bad like a lot of people would make you think. It just needs to be regulated. So when you're stressed out and you got too much cortisol, then it kind of starts, suppressing other hormones. You feel exhausted and tired all the time. You feel like you're ready to go, whoop some behind, because you're always in that fight or flight mode. And that's what cortisol does. It ramps you up. It gets you going. So that's why it's very important to kind of find ways to deal with stress, so you're not constantly stuck in this fight or flight state, which is eventually going to tire you out and wear out your adrenals. And now there's a lot of controversy whether adrenal fatigue is actually a thing or not, but in my personal opinion, I do believe it, because I kind of did go through it myself, and ashwagandha kind of helped me deal with my stress, and in turn it kind of helped me get over that fatigue and that exhaustion. But in addition to affecting our hormones, stress can have other negative consequences as well. So essentially what it can do is stress can deplete our body's neurotransmitters by affecting the central nervous system. So we're going to be looking at the three important neurotransmitters that stress tends to deplete, and the first one is dopamine. Now, dopamine is the neurotransmitter that drives motivation, and it also depletes norepinephrine, which promotes wakefulness and metabolism. Again, that's why stress, when you're so stressed out, you get exhausted, because you don't have enough energy to get through it, because this essential neurotransmitter is depleted. And then it also depletes serotonin, which is that feel-good hormone. It's the happy hormone. And as well, serotonin gets turned into melatonin later on through a couple, enzymatic processes. And it also can, help you with sleep. So if serotonin is out the window, your sleep is also going to be affected. You're not going to be getting great sleep, even though you're actually exhausted. So that's why stress can have, a catastrophic effect on the body, because it doesn't allow you to rest, and you're constantly, in that fight or flight mode. So essentially, this is where ashwagandha comes in handy, because it's going to help, and we're going to take a look at that as we go through the data. So pretty much long-term effects of stress, we can see things like cognitive deficits. That is, difficulties with memory, attention, learning, and focus, because you're not resting, guys. You're constantly on the run. So you're not gonna be able to pay attention to to detail. You're not gonna be able to sit there and focus. You're not gonna be able to sit there and work efficiently, because you're always just so tired, and you're always so stressed out, and your mind is everywhere. And that is one long-term consequence that stress can have. The other is anxiety and depression. and a poor immunity, because we all know that when your hormones are out of whack, then the whole system is out of whack. And then, you know, if you're exhausted, if you're fatigued, if you're out of it, if your body is just not functioning at its best, you're not going to be able to defend yourself. So that could be, you know, you could find yourself getting sicker all the time. Unfortunately, a lot of people go on to develop more serious conditions because their immune system can't recognize and fight off certain things like cancerous cells. And then, you know, a lot of people don't know about this, but there is a type of stomach ulcer called a stress-induced stomach ulcer. And the mechanism behind that is essentially your protective lining kind of, you know, gets diminished in the stomach, and then blood flow to the stomach as well isn't at its best. So you end up developing stress-induced stomach ulcers, which can be a serious problem in and of itself. The other area where a lot of people can see consequences of stress is also with blood sugar abnormalities. And, you know, you're going to find that your blood sugar is not well controlled, and when blood sugar is not well controlled, you start to see things like fatigue and weight gain and just a lot of, you know, unpleasant consequences of that. So, you know, unfortunately, like I said before, with the way that the world is moving and how we're kind of moving into a 24-hour society, a lot of these conditions are becoming more and more prevalent. You know, more people are becoming sick because they're not able to deal with stress. You know, the cost of living is going up, school is becoming harder, it's harder to put food on the table, and people are always just working and trying to, you know, accomplish things, and they're never taking a step back, or they're never taking any time for themselves. So, you know, because of that, we're seeing a lot more mental health problems, we're seeing a lot more physical problems. I mean, I kind of went through a lot of the same things myself. So to successfully combat stress, we need adaptation. Now let's look at the definition of adaptation, and this may help us better understand what ashwagandha is doing in our body. So adaptation is defined as a minimal or absent hormonal response when exposed to a stressor, as well as rapid homeostasis or a rapid return to normal once the stressor is withdrawn. So essentially what it means is that when you get exposed to stress, that hormone cortisol doesn't go all over the place, doesn't go out of whack. So you keep yourself in check, you keep your hormones in check, which means you keep your body in check. And then when that stressor is taken away, you go back to being normal fairly quickly. So that's, you know, that's pretty awesome when it comes to how adaptation can help us withstand and survive stress. All right, you guys, now let's take a look at the science and see what the science has to say about this. Because I know a lot of you guys are thinking like, okay, you know, that sounds all great, but where did this evidence come from? So this is what we're going to take a look at. So remember, we're going to be looking at a couple things. We're going to be looking at animal studies, and we're going to be looking at human studies. So there's still a lot of debate on whether, you know, like mice studies do actually, you know, mean anything because they're not done on humans. But, you know, personally, I do kind of find support in mice studies just because their anatomy and their physiology is very similar to ours. But, you know, again, we shouldn't just focus on those. So bear with me for a second. Let's take a look at this first animal study. This animal study measured ashwagandha's ability to reduce the effects of chronic stress on mice. And ashwagandha reduced the number and the severity of stress-induced stomach ulcers comparable to the pharmaceutical drug ranitidine. Now, ranitidine is some powerful stuff, okay? So if a plant is able to do something as well as a pharmaceutical agent, I think that's pretty awesome. I think that shouldn't be ignored. So it also improved memory, attention, and focus, as well as ramped up their immune system. So, you know, like I was discussing before, now you're dealing with the physical consequences of stress by reducing the stomach ulcers. You're improving, you know, cognition, so you're able to focus on the finer details and focus on your work. And you're ramping up your immune system, so you're not exposing yourself to more catastrophic conditions like cancer or, you know, some contagious infections that could really wreak havoc on your body. So let's take a look at a human study, actually. Researchers measured ashwagandha's ability to reduce stress, anxiety, and improve general well-being, which I know is what a lot of us are trying to do. So 64 participants were given a placebo. Now a placebo, guys, that's pretty much a pill with nothing in it to trick the person that's taking it into thinking that they're getting something. And the reason why they do this is to test something called the placebo effect. So believe it or not, our minds are very powerful organs. So when you take something, and when you're not really taking anything, but you're convinced that it's doing something, sometimes that does actually have, beneficial qualities in and of itself. So especially when it comes to things like mood, not as much physical things, but more, mental health, placebo effect can be a very, very powerful thing. And that's something that, we can use when it comes to developing other treatments, whether we're using ashwagandha or not. And so to kind of recap a little bit, so 64 participants were giving a placebo. So these 64 participants were split into two groups. So the other group got 300 milligrams of ashwagandha. Now both groups, the placebo group and the ashwagandha group, they got the treatments twice a day for 60 days. Now get this, the ashwagandha group significantly reduced stress, blood cortisol levels, and improved overall well-being. So, the theory is that placebo, when it comes to stress, ain't gonna do that much in this situation, but ashwagandha actually can. So that's, something worth noting. All right, you guys, now let's take a look at the next benefit, which is anxiety and depression. Now, let's be honest, we all deal with this. This is not something that anyone is immune to. I mean, I'm all up and downs, you don't want to go into this theme park because it's a whole nother ball game. But we can all benefit from something, whether it's therapy or an herbal substance that can help us get through our stress and depression and anxiety. So let's see what ashwagandha can do for us when it comes to that. So one animal study compared ashwagandha to the anti-anxiety drug lorazepam. Now this is some pretty strong stuff, guys. Lorazepam is a benzodiazepine, and the downside to benzos is that they come with a lot of abuse potential. They're very addictive, so it's pretty surprising to me that this is what they chose to compare ashwagandha to. And also the tricyclic antidepressant imipramine, also another very powerful pharmaceutical drug. So let's see what we got. So mice were given ashwagandha 1 time per day for 5 days. And I mean, the fact that this is only a small study, shows that whatever they got out of it is some pretty powerful stuff. So when it came to the anti-anxiety effect, guys, get this. Ashwagandha lowered anxiety in just 5 days, comparable to lorazepam. Do you know what that means? That means there's an herbal substance with no abuse potential actually, and rarely any side effects, that's extremely safe to take, that had the same effect as an extremely strong, powerful, man-made anti-anxiety agent with a lot of side effects and a lot of abuse potential. And just so you don't think that the study was BS or anything, let's look at this. They measured a endocrine marker for clinical anxiety called tribulin, and even after administration of pentyl and tetrazole, I don't even know if I said that right, but even after inducing chemical anxiety and giving ashwagandha, they were still able to see positive results. I don't even know what to say. I'm speechless. Now let's look at its antidepressant effect, okay? So when it came to lowering depression, they also found ashwagandha to be comparable to imipramine. Again, in just 5 days, guys. And they did this by measuring the antidepressant effect on a test called the Swim-Induced Behavioral Despair and Learned Helplessness tests. So I'm not sure if I get this right, but I think what they do is they kind of expose mice to a life-threatening situation in water or something, and then they see how they respond to just how they respond to depression. And the fact that, again, ashwagandha was able to lower anxiety and depression in just 5 days, comparable to 2 very powerful, very well-studied pharmaceutical drugs. I think that's awesome. I mean, I don't know about you, but I think that's awesome. All right, you guys, on to the next benefit, which is cognitive benefits. All right. So we did kind of touch on this a little bit when we were talking about, memory, attention, focus, those kinds of things. But let's see what the science has to say about it as well. So ashwagandha has been beneficial in helping those with ADHD and Alzheimer's. Now, ADHD is the most common chronic neurobehavioral condition in children worldwide, with 8 to 12% of the population affected. And unfortunately now, a lot of adults are starting to have it too. So ADHD is characterized by academic underachievement, problems with personal relationships, and low self-esteem. Now, I'm going to be honest with you guys, I'm someone that's diagnosed with ADHD, and I've been in and out of doctor's office, I've received many treatments for it, and I can definitely relate to what it is that they're saying here. I had problems with school, I, struggled with my personal relationships, and for most of my life I had low self-esteem. So, ADHD is something very serious, and I think a lot of people think it's one of those like, oh, everyone has ADHD, or oh, it's not a real thing. But the truth is, it really is. So, again, check this out. Let's see what ashwagandha can do for us. So, human and animal studies looked at ashwagandha's ability to lessen the symptoms of ADHD. Ashwagandha was found to increase the number of acetylcholine receptors in the brain. Now, acetylcholine is another neurotransmitter which we didn't touch on before, and acetylcholine essentially helps with memory and learning. It helps you remember things, and it helps you with long-term memory and focus as well. So it also regulated acetylcholinesterase enzyme activity. Now guys, every neurotransmitter in the body has an enzyme that breaks it down. So you have receptors, and the number of receptors that you have makes a difference on, how much of that neurotransmitter can be taken up into the body and what effects you're going to see by that. The other thing that affects how well a neurotransmitter works is how active the enzyme is that breaks it down and how fast it works. So what they're saying here is that ashwagandha regulated acetylcholinesterase enzyme activity in essentially helping acetylcholine work longer in the brain. So you're going to get double whammy here. It increased the number of acetylcholine receptors, which means that acetylcholine is going to work better in the brain because there are more receptors to take it up. And it slowed down the breakdown of acetylcholine by slowing down the enzyme activity. That's some pretty awesome stuff. So the results was an increase in attention, focus, and memory retention, therefore reducing hyperactivity and helping with ADHD. And guys, when you're comparing, something that's natural to something that's, pharmaceutical, like the stimulant class of drugs, and you kind of see a lot of these similar benefits between the two, I think that's something to worth know, because, I think it's important to stress that pharmaceutical drugs and agents are good. They're not inherently bad, but they also come with their own side effects. They come with their own problems. And so do natural substances, all right? I mean, ashwagandha has some very minimal side effects, which we'll talk about when we get to that video. But, when you're thinking about pharmaceutical agents that have a high potential for abuse and something that is natural, it's always worth considering going the natural approach first. And you know what? If it doesn't work for you, which it may not for everyone, then let's consider pharmaceutical agents, all right? So other animal studies also showed that ashwagandha was beneficial in treating Alzheimer's. Now, sadly, guys, Alzheimer's is the most common form of dementia in the world, and it is characterized by low levels of acetylcholine. So here we go again. We're raising the number of acetylcholine receptors, and we're slowing down the breakdown of acetylcholine in people with Alzheimer's who need it, and that can really, really benefit them. So ashwagandha also has some other cool benefits when it comes to Alzheimer's disease, and ashwagandha essentially what it does is it prevented the loss and promoted the growth of brain axons, dendrites, synapses, and neurites. These are essentially, the building blocks of the brain. These are what help, memory stay in. They're what help neurotransmitters work and communicate. They're what help your brain function, essentially. So it's preventing the loss and promoting the growth. So it's increasing new brain growth. That's pretty awesome. So it essentially reduced the negative side effects of Alzheimer's in mice. All right, you guys, now let's take a look at ashwagandha's antioxidant benefits. So ashwagandha's got some free radical busting properties, all right? I'll tell you that for sure. So free radicals, guys, are these oxygen-containing molecules in our body that have an uneven number of electrons. So they got an uneven charge. And what they do is they go into our body looking to even out that charge, or looking to even out, by grabbing that missing electron. So they go around our body and they see an electron and they take it. And what that does is it damages our perfectly healthy tissue and DNA. And what that process is called oxidative stress. Now, free radicals come from several different areas. There's way too many to list off, so I'm going to just list off the most important ones, and that is pollution, that is cigarette smoke, medications, and different types of foods that we eat, like smoked foods, for example, and highly processed foods. So oxidative stress can have a particularly devastating effect on the brain and the central nervous system. Now that's because the brain and the central nervous system are loaded with iron and lipids, or fats. And this iron and fat is a buffet when it comes to free radicals. I mean, they just go in there and they see all these electrons and they start taking it. So when you have free radical damage in the brain and the central nervous system, you get neurodegenerative diseases. Now, these diseases can be things like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, schizophrenia, epilepsy, ADHD, and a lot more. So check this out. Let's take a look at what the research has to say. So one animal study measured ashwagandha's antioxidant capacity on the frontal cortex of the brain, which is responsible for speech and language, motor skills, object comparison, memory formation, personality, attention, and motivation. Now, these mice were given ashwagandha for 21 days. And at the end of the 21 days, what they did was they measured 3 antioxidant scavenging enzyme levels. Those were superoxide dismutase, catalase, and glutathione. Now, glutathione is important, guys, because glutathione is the master antioxidant in the body. That's like the King Arthur of free radical busters, the Ghostbusters of free radicals, whatever you want to call it. That's a badass, So, believe it or not, ashwagandha increased these antioxidant levels, comparable to the very effective Parkinson's drug selegiline. Again, showing you how powerful of a natural herb this is, that it can do the same, if not more, than a pharmaceutical agent, with years of clinical data, years of testing and development. So that's what I mean when ashwagandha really packs a punch when it comes to fighting off free radicals. All right, you guys, that sums up the first video on ashwagandha. I hope you made it through it, and let me know what you guys thought of this video, if you like this style of teaching that I do. We're gonna get down and dirty in the next future videos on ashwagandha. So go ahead, guys, again, hit that like button, ring that notification bell so you get notified when I release my next videos, and don't forget to supplement and subscribe. I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.